All right, welcome everybody. My name is Josh Singer. I'm the teacher of the Intro to Racism and White Privilege course. Thank you for joining me today. Two quick announcements. One is I know I sound like a broken record, but the capacity to do this course is continuing to diminish with my kids starting online learning, still doing a full-time job, getting more involved with the election coming up. So it's looking like I'm doing like one class a month at this point, and hopefully when my capacity, will get better, and over the winter I'll get back to 2 to 3 classes a month. And but luckily there's a lot of content, a lot more than I expected in these classes. So I mean, it's good news is you can take your time with that. You don't have to rush. So that's first announcement. The second announcement is I skipped some classes just temporarily. I wanted to do the political right class right during this sweet spot right now between the convention, the political conventions, and the election. Because it's really, I mean, if you want to understand a political party, you want to understand the strategies they use, the rhetoric they use, the concepts and philosophies they espouse. This is the time to do it. This is the time to study a political party. Yeah, I skipped this. This was supposed to be like, I think, class 11, and we're on class like 6 or 7. So we're going to do this class, but then after this class, I'm going to go back to the original order, which I think is going to be like whitewashing history is our next course. A couple of things first before we get started. The first one is, why do a class on the political right? Is this bias? Why not do a class on Democrats? All this. Real quickly, the main reason why we're really focusing on the political right is because it's concept strategic racism. And it's not to say the Democrats aren't big on strategic racism, and we're going to talk about some of the Democrats today that do that. Like Clinton was huge on raising growing mass incarceration, destroying welfare, but while using strategic racism to push these policies. And so when we do talk about Democrats a lot, just about every class, we're going to, very critical of Democrats. There's a lot they can prove. And that being said, this is a founding principle. This is a founding strategy of the political right. And I think what a lot of people aren't aware of is the political right is a new, somewhat new entity in this country that really, like, when I say political right, I'm talking about the modern political Republican Party that emerged in the 50s and 60s, talking about the religious right, the political voting bloc called the religious right that emerged in the late 70s, early 80s, and the right-wing media, particularly Fox News, which is was started by a Republican operative, Roger Ailes, and with the intention of becoming this Republican, kind of news station. So that, started in the mid 90s. So a lot of this is relatively new, but all of this, one of the founding principles of all these things was strategic racism. And not to say that, there's other things that involve, for sure, like the Cold War was big, we could probably have a whole class on that. There was an anti-feminist movement in the 80s. We can have a whole class on that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, today. There are economies and recessions and political climates and foreign policies and all these things, for sure, were part of the creation of the Republican Party, creation of the political right, for sure. But just to teach those things and not mention strategic racism is really you're really doing a disservice on the history of this. So in this class, we focus on racism. So again, we're not I'm not trying to reduce everything to racism, but I need I want to teach that the fact that this was a component. Maybe it could be one of the main components, but this was a big component, particularly of the foundation of the modern Republican Party, which essentially is started in direct opposition of the 1964 Civil Rights Bill, with these new strategies to kind of push the same racist policies of segregation and anti-civil rights, against Black people, while coding that racism and making it seem, not so racist, like states' rights. We just want we're not here to hurt Black people. We just want states' rights. We just want law and order, and things like that. So this was, and we're going to talk. This is what this class is about. about is kind of talking about how strategic racism was the founding principle of a lot of this. When you talk about strategic racism, a lot of times it's not about, spreading racism. It's not. I mean, these people aren't evil, trying to, necessarily. There's just, a lot of them, like, the founders of the modern political party was, George Wallace, Nixon, Barry Goldwater, later Reagan. A lot of these people, outside Reagan, were very supportive of civil rights, before their political career started, and a lot of them voted, had voted on civil rights bills and things like that, but they ultimately realized there was um, a lot more votes to be had, particularly among white people, if they started, pushing racism strategically, especially coded racism. Um, and so that's not to say that, everyone, everyone that votes for Republican Party is an openly, racist kind of, I do believe that most people that, most voters, they vote on legitimate concerns. They have legitimate issues. They're worried about the economy. They're worried about their jobs. They're worried about their family. They're worried about their safety. They're worried about their civil rights. Their ability to practice religion, things like that. So these are real issues that people are concerned about. But where strategic racism comes in with this stuff is oftentimes they'll have politicians that say, "Oh, you're worried about your job. Well, guess what? All those immigrants that are coming into our country are stealing your jobs, and they're also, rapists and drug dealers. But if you vote for me, I'll crack down on immigration violently." Never mind all the neoliberal policies that are sending your jobs overseas and outsourcing and automation and transfer of wealth to the upper class. Don't worry about that stuff. Worry about these immigrants. They're the ones taking their jobs. So that, that's the same with, like, safety. You're worried about safety of your family. That's a, concern. But guess what? Those black people that are moving into your suburbs, they're dangerous. They're rapists, and they're gonna, bring down your property values and threaten the safety of your family. But vote for us, and we'll continue, supporting housing discrimination to keep them out. Or look at those people in the streets that are protesting police brutality. They're not really protesting police brutality. They're really terrorists that are trying to destroy our country, which is literally what the political right is pushing right now. Vote for us, and we'll bring back law and order. Or that, football player that's kneeling, during the national anthem to protest police brutality. He's not really protesting police brutality. He's trying to be disrespectful for the troops. So if you care about the troops, so do we. Vote for us. So it's like that. Those kind of narratives. Where they play on this idea that, these are legitimate concerns. Yes, I want to support my troops. But they twist, what is really happening. So that's strategic racism. And it's really evolved. And been a foundational component of the political right. And the political, Republicans in the 50s and 60s, the religious right in the 80s, right-wing media in the 90s, all, we're essentially founded on these policies. Yes, there was other issues as well going on, but these were big issues that founded it. So this is why we're going to spend a whole class period kind of just exploring this history, and trying to understand, better, how all this started, and how effective it is. Because a lot of times, what makes it so effective is our country is literally founded on a lot of these narratives of fearing black people as, black criminality, these narratives of immigrant, dangerous immigrants, invading our country. On savage and indigenous people, a lot of anti-indigenous, anti-black, xenophobia, patriarchy. All these policies, these things that we've been absorbing for centuries. So then when a politician comes and says, your problems aren't because of the rich people that are, getting richer by exploiting you. Your problems are actually because of people, those marginalized, people that they're the ones that are threatening and causing all your problems. So, and that's, especially, in 1964, when with the Civil Rights Bill, when that outlawed Jim Crow. Well, the South, for centuries, the South was, white people were told that black people were dangerous criminals, and we had to protect yourselves. You had to segregate yourselves. So then the federal government says, hey, that's not right. We're going to integrate. We're going to remove Jim Crow and all this, and we're going to desegregate everything. And then all of a sudden, you have a lot of white people that are scared, they're angry, and then comes this Republican Party, this new Republican Party that basically says that we're going to protect you. while making it seem not racist. And so, I mean, and I mean, people ate that up. I mean, they got huge. I mean, if you look at from the 60s, you know, all the way to you know, president, the Republican Party has been dominating our political landscape. You know, the 60s, you know, there was a lot, it was great, you know, culturally speaking for a lot of civil rights movements and for a lot of groups, but politically speaking, I mean, the political right has been dominating presidencies, you know, our Congress, you know, state and local level. Even to this day, there the political, you know, Republican Party or GOP, which is Grand Old Party. You'll hear me say GOP a lot. It's literally, yeah, they control majority of our government right now. And it's scary that most people don't really know that the origin stories of the modern Republican Party. They think it actually goes all the way back to Lincoln. There's actually propaganda movies that try to, you know, say that in reality. There was a political realignment in the 60s, particularly around the 1964 Civil Rights Bill, where Democrats who were the party of white supremacy were, you know, thanks to FDR and Truman and LBJ, was pushed more towards, you know, civil rights, while the Republican Party became this, you know, oppositional party against civil rights, against desegregation. And so in that political alignment, I mean, it took all the way up to the 80s or 90s to really finish, but that really started in the 50s and 60s. So anyway, that's why we're gonna have a whole class on the political right, because this is really important history. And even if you, I mean, like, you know, if you're voting Republican, great, you know, that, you know, that's up to you, but everyone should at least understand the history behind this, particularly around race. So that's why we're doing this class. Cool. All right. Um, so a lot of times, you know, when I play videos in this class, I'll upload them to YouTube. I'll download them, you know, from YouTube, kind of, and slice them up and edit them, and then upload them back to YouTube. And then sometimes though, YouTube will tell me, hey, there's some copyright issues, and we're gonna stop you from playing that. And this is one of those times. There's this really great show segment on John Oliver's show about the recent RNC, and he does a really great job kind of like identifying different forms of strategic racism, from misinformation, race neutral racism, you know, fear, things like that, and then talks about, you know, how that's relating to Kenosha, and how this is, you know, a strategy right now that Republican Party are using to kind of demonize people protesting police brutality. It's a really fantastic video to start this class. Unfortunately, YouTube won't let me slice it up and load it into my presentation, but we can still watch it. We just got to go to the original YouTube page on John Oliver's show. So if you go to Google, if you pause this, I want some of them talking, and go to Google and RNCA, you can RNC to 2020 and type that in, or go to YouTube, that'll come up. Or if you have downloaded the presentation, you can copy and paste the YouTube link, or literally on the page, if you're watching this from the People's School of DC's page, it's literally right below in the video section, is there a hyperlink to this. So unfortunately, I had edited it down to like an 8 or 9 minute clip, but the total clip's like 20 minutes. So sorry, but definitely I would recommend watching this, and then when you're done, just come back and go to the next clip. Cool. All right, so hopefully everyone got a chance to watch the John Oliver show. So now I'm going to kind of just briefly talk about what we're going to be going over today in class. So the first section, we're going to have a short, really quick section on what is dog whistle politics. So this is essential to really understand the modern Republican Party and how it was built, particularly around the Southern strategy. It was using these dog whistle politics that make, you know, racism not seem racist. So it's like instead of like opposing segregation and opposing desegregation and opposing, you know, believing that black people are inferior, instead you just say things like states' rights, instead of, you know, or say law and order. You know, Nixon created up law and order as a great way to cover up the fact that he was violently oppressing civil rights activists, and so he criminalized them, and then said, you know, we need to bring back law and order, which is, you know, what's happening right now today. So then we're going to talk about the Southern strategy and the rise of modern GOP, and how, you know, Southern strategy started out as a strategy in the South, but mainly became Republican Party's main strategy around race for the entire nation. And this is, you know, basically using dog whistle politics to kind of continue pushing racist policies while making people feel not so racist. And then the religious right, when they emerged in the 80s, particularly around many leaders like religious right leaders like Jerry Falwell, their tax exemption status for a lot of their profitable but very segregated schools were being violent, threatened, and that's what really led to this like new voting bloc that they later, push, use the issues like abortion and things like that. But we're going to kind of talk about the history and how that actually came about. Then right-wing media in the 80s and 90s, basically, conservative talk show hosts, Rush Limbaugh and then later Fox News in the mid 90s, started by a Republican strategic, strategist, Roger Ailes, and then how that, eventually came to more extreme versions like InfoWars and Breitbart and stuff like that. Then we're going to briefly talk about the Tea Party, who's still relevant today for sure. Not as relevant as they were, several years ago, but still worth, important enough to understand because they definitely paved the way for the next topic, Trump, which we won't spend too much time on Trump because he does so much, but at the same time, it's important to understand that he's a symptom. But we're going to talk, about, a little bit about Trump and a little bit about Trump's voters. We got a lot of data around like exit polls and studies that kind of analyze why people felt like felt like inclined to vote for, why did people vote for Trump, when he had this openly, explicitly racist campaign. And then the next section we're going to talk about, this is a new section that's going to be a work in progress. I'd love some feedback if I missed things or if I misrepresented things. But, so the Republican Party has this official platform, like every party that they talk about, anti-gun regulations, anti-abortion, things like that. And then they have an unspoken platform that the vast majority of them push, but they don't talk about, like voter suppression, neoliberal policies, different versions of like, pushing, mixing up, patriotism and nationalism, different views of liberty, like liberty can be, it can be individual liberty or it could be social liberty. And they push this idea that can only be individual liberty, which is basically the right to do whatever you want, regardless of how it hurts others. And then the last section we're going to have is far right terrorism, and I'm not saying at all, Republican, voters and supporters are terrorists. I'm just saying that a lot of these, the narratives, the false narratives that they push, like dangerous Black people and dangerous immigrants invading this country, and that we should be worried that our demographics are changing, and all the xenophobia and things like that. A lot of that, some people take that, to the next level. These are it's the same narrative. I mean, this is why a lot of white supremacist groups are so supportive of Trump and the Republican Party, is because they use the same narratives. It's just the white supremacists take it to the next level. And unfortunately, that this is the leading cause of terrorism is domestic white nationalist terrorism in this country today. And it's just rising and growing bigger and bigger right now. So we need to kind of talk about it and talk about the connections it has on the political right. All right. So that's what we're going to be talking about today.